much too complex, much too complex, too complex, too complex, too complex.
Good afternoon. My name is James K. Holder II. Some of you may know me as Sir James II. I'd like to welcome you back to Not on My Watch. If you're watching, I'd like to ask you to like, share, comment, and subscribe. I want you to retweet this and repeat this. If you're watching, today is February 8th, 2018, and again, we are still celebrating Black History Month, but I have to take a moment to celebrate a bit of white history as well. As you can see today, I am wearing my winter white tuxedo jacket in honor of the Honorable Nancy Pelosi, House Minority Leader. Nancy Pelosi yesterday made history as the first, making the longest speech recorded in House history on the House floor. She talked for 8 hours and 7 minutes as she read accounts from the Dreamers. She spoke in defense of course, deferred Dreamers. I really should know what that acronym stands for. But it's all about people who weren't necessarily born in this country and their parents migrated to the United States. And so because they came here so young, they might be 17, 18, but they really don't know any other culture, they don't know any other language, and so they are Americans. By virtue of everything that we consider to be the American principles and creed, as people like to say, Dreamers are Americans, so we should be defending them. So that was what she chose to do, and prior to that, the previous record for this was held by Representative Champ Clark of Missouri, who in 1909 gave a speech for 5 hours and 15 minutes. So Nancy Pelosi passed that for by nearly 3 hours. And it's really, really incredibly commendable that she did it, again, in a winter white pantsuit and 4-inch spiked heels, because she's 77 years old and everyone is coming for the Queen. And so we really have to bow down and pay homage to the Honorable Nancy Pelosi. She is one of my sheroes, and I have to interrupt Black History Month to celebrate her accomplishment on this day. Now, of course, this is in conjunction with the budget deal. You know, a few weeks ago, there was the whole thing about the government shutdown, which was because of the Democrats refusing to coalesce around a budget unless it protected Dreamers and also the CHIP program. So many episodes back, I was begging you all to call your senators and representatives to get them to defend CHIP. That got enforced. They've extended CHIP by 6 years and funded it, so that's great. The fight is not over because, again, now the key part with this budget is the DREAM Act, and so what we need you to do is call your senators and your representatives, all three, and tell them no dream, no deal, meaning you need them to vote down any budget that doesn't protect the Dreamers. It's very important. It's a really big issue. It's funny to me because maybe this is me just being ignorant, but it seems to become a much, much greater issue after the election. The Dreamers issue, I think a lot of people really, again, didn't expect Donald Trump to become president, which is really ironic to me, because I think you have a lot of people now who are working and are sympathetic to Dreamers who knowingly understood the threat that Donald Trump presented and still didn't do the work to make sure that Hillary Clinton got elected. And that's very unfortunate, because I feel like you've got a lot of people pulling on both sides of the aisle. There's been a lot of talk just in the atmosphere, people of the pure left, the dirtbag leftists who are the purity politicians with their purity popsicles, who are attacking Nancy Pelosi today and yesterday based on the fact that when she had a supermajority in the House and Barack Obama was president, they didn't pass the Clean Dream Act. And what people fail to realize is that, one, the sympathies towards Dreamers isn't what it was when Barack Obama was elected in 2008. This is an issue that really has changed over a span of time. many issues changed over that span of time, including LGBT marriage equality. You had Barack Obama, who ran not supporting gay marriage, and then ultimately switched on it, and then even not through his own power, the Supreme Court itself ratified a decision to make marriage equality a federal law. And so we have to really remember that there's a space and time for everything. And I'm not excusing Nancy Pelosi's inaction on immigration, but I'm rather saying if you're saying that really it's Pelosi's fault, and Pelosi is too old and she's the old guard and she needs to clear out because for fresh blood like Bernie Sanders, you'd have to also ask yourself why the year before Nancy Pelosi became House Speaker, making her the most powerful woman to ever be elected to a position in the United States. Let's say that again, because this is what you people don't understand. The reason why they come for Nancy Pelosi so aggressively is not because of any one singular policy position or accomplishment or failure. It's simply because she's the one to gun for. When Hillary Clinton was aiming to surpass her in echelonness of governance, they came for her. And now that Hillary Clinton is back in the shadows, the attacks are really, really, really aggressively pointed at now the House Minority Leader, Nancy Pelosi, who again served as the leader of the House when she narrowly wrangled enough votes on both sides of the aisle to pass the ACA. So, and then following that, it led to a massive flushing of Democratic seats from the House and Senate over the following 6 years of big elections, and like midterms and general elections. That's why all those seats were lost, really solely because of the ACA. I think the environment in which the ACA was passed was made incredibly difficult because you had so many people reeling from the catastrophic management of our economy by George W. Bush. We really are doing ourselves a disservice when we pretend, and by we I mean you, people who voted for Donald Trump, pretend that Donald Trump inherited the same America that Barack Obama inherited. Barack Obama inherited a fundamentally damaged economy and populace in the 2008 election and had to do a lot of groundwork to cover up for that. So let's say kudos to Barack Obama. Let's say kudos to Nancy Pelosi on this day. Let's call our senators and representatives and get them to believe that there is no deal without the Dreamers. And now I'm going to take this jacket off as we talk about the 2018 Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang, Korea, which the opening ceremony for starts tomorrow, but we really have to acknowledge that some of the activities are already underway. So tonight, the men's, It's called the short program or the technical program happens, and also these pairs skating competition happens tonight on NBC. It starts at 8 p.m., I believe, Eastern. And so what's important about that and what to look out for and how it intersects with this show? Now, a couple of things happen in concert, so I'm going to try to discuss them in a way that's eloquent and not too specific to the sport. I am a fan of figure skating. Typically when it relates and intersects to black female figure skaters, but it is important to watch the overall sport, and there's some phenomenal things going on politically and athletically. On the straight sports side, the person to watch today is Nathan Chen. Nathan Chen is, I believe, an 18-year-old skater. He's from Middle America. I don't really know where. His heritage is Chinese, but he's American-born, and he's from like South Dakota or Utah or somewhere, one of the flyover states. No shade. But he is a phenomenal skater who has broken records for points and also performance. He's the only skater alive who can he's the only skater to ever perform all 5 quadruple jumps. So if anyone knows anything about figure skating, there's 6 types of jumps you could do, and one of the jumps requires an additional half rotation. That's an axel jump. You might know Tanya Harding became very famous for being the only American woman up until the point of Mirai Nagasu to land a triple axel jump, and I believe that was in 1991. So that's significant. or maybe 1992, but if you watch I, Tonya, they discuss it in that. So the triple axel is a jump that primarily men do regularly, but women almost never do. And Tonya Harding and now Mirai Nagasu are the only two people from America, women from America, to ever do it. Mirai Nagasu is representing the United States team this year in Pyeongchang, but she won't be performing tonight. So that's one thing to look for. Nathan Chen can perform every other type of jump in 4 rotations, which is sort of an anomaly, and it's a feat, and he's amazing to watch, and he's incredibly consistent. So he is favored to win the gold medal at the Olympics, and it's his first Olympic performance. He started skating a very long time ago, and there's this video of him as like a 5-year-old kid skating on the ice, and they interview him and they ask him what he aspires to do, and he says he wants to win the gold at the 2018 Olympics. And this is something he said when he was like 5 years old. So that's, again, he's a really important person to watch in these games. Now, another very important person to watch in these particular games is Adam Rippon. Adam Rippon has been cited as the first openly gay male figure skater. Now, that is something that most people would laugh at, because in watching the sport and not throwing any shade at anybody or being homophobic and making assumptions about people based on their occupation or their chosen displays and expressions, obviously there are other LGBTQ figure skaters in world history, let alone American history. And I really think they even amped it up to say that he was the first openly gay Winter Olympic performer, not even limited to figure skating. Don't quote me on that. Why is this significant? It's for a couple of reasons. Adam Rippon, representing the United States on the American figure skating team in Pyeongchang, is somewhat controversial because he didn't place in the U.S. Figure Skating Championships, which is typically a big indicator of who's going to make the final team. There was a skater, I don't remember this guy's name. His name is he has an interesting name, and I cannot remember what it is. So if I might put it in the notes if I remember it. He placed second at the U.S. Figure Skating Championship, but it was really in an anomaly of a performance. He really didn't perform in the skating circuit on the global scale for the season, so he doesn't have a reputation for landing really consistent performances or having a really high average point value. And the Olympic figure skating organization essentially forms a team around who they believe is best likely to medal. And even though Adam Rippon didn't medal in that one specific performance, which represents the country best as a whole, and is the most recent in association, the most recent qualifying competition for the Olympic teams, he actually had he performed on every other stage in the season on the international circuit that qualifies for the competition, and didn't necessarily, I don't know that he medaled in all of them or any of them, but his point value was much higher than the other person who placed silver at the U.S. I cannot remember his name. The United States Championships in January. So there not a boycott, but there was a lot of ruckus around Adam Rippon being on the team, and it wasn't about his sexuality. So I want to clear that up and explain why people were boycotting Adam Rippon being on the team. Now, Adam Rippon serves a very specific purpose on this team because he's actually now skating in his third Olympic Games with the team, where the other two members on the team are now entering their first debut competitions at the U.S. Olympics. So when you build a team, there's a benefit around having at least one vet on the team, and this other person that they took off would have also been a novice, making overall the ideas that the overall team would be weaker. Another significant point is that Mike Pence, who's known for being incredibly homophobic and leading the charge on many incredibly homophobic and dangerous practices, including promoting electroshock therapy to pray away the gay, as they say, he's leading the delegation of the U.S. Olympic team in Pyeongchang for two obvious reasons: because Donald Trump is an idiot, and then also because Donald Trump really shouldn't be that close to the North Korean border. Throwing it out there. That adds another complicated layer to these Olympics, but I'm really focused on this one. Adam Rippon basically wasted no time once he made it onto the team, rallying loudly against Mike Pence leading this delegation, because he's saying that ultimately, how dare you even have this person function in a way that is supposed to represent and lead people like Adam Rippon and other LGBTQ athletes in a global stage where they should all be supporting gay athletes and lesbian athletes and trans athletes as well. Adam Rippon made this really blanket statement shading the hell out of Mike Pence, and it was a really big deal. So much so that Mike Pence was really embarrassed and infuriated by it, and so he invited Adam Rippon to the White House to have a discussion about. I don't know what that discussion would have been about, but he invited him there to discuss. So Adam Rippon said, "Thanks, but no thanks. I actually have to train for the Olympics. Give me a call after I win these gold, silvers, or bronze medals, and then we can talk about everything that's wrong with you and your positions in your position as probably the most homophobic and anti-LGBT vice president to ever serve in American history." Now, one thing to point out is that that makes this even more significant to this year, and this is this might be a little long episode. This is an incredibly woman-driven and queer-driven episode in the context of Black history, and I want to point that out. So if you don't like gay people, if you don't like women, if you don't like Black people, you probably shouldn't keep watching this. But don't turn away, because that's bad advice for a content creator like myself. I want you to watch, share, subscribe, and comment. The murders of gay and bi men are actually up 400% since Trump took office last January. So you could argue that the motivation for NBC to set the stage for this conversation is political. You could argue that it's all commercial. You could argue anything you want. But the reality is the conversation that Adam Rippon is bringing up, that no one else can, when the world is focused on Pyeongchang, is incredibly, incredibly courageous, it's brave, and it's important. And it really is making history, especially if he wins something at this awards. Now, Nathan is probably going to win gold, knock on wood, but, well, let me knock on wood, actually. And if Adam wins something too, if Adam wins a pair of earrings out of this, that would be fantastic. So good luck to all three of you young men from the Olympic team in the United States. Speaking of Black women in figure skating, of course, it's Black History Month, and so on my Instagram page, @JKH2, I do a daily celebration of the living Black history. Today, I focus specifically on Black women at the Olympics in figure skating. Black female figure skaters in the Olympics. And of course, there was a conversation centered around Debbie Thomas, Surya Bonali, Mabel, I should know her name, I'm sorry. Okay. Follow my Instagram account. I talk about also Star Andrews and May Bernice Maita and Vanessa James. Those are two Black women. May Bernice Maita and Vanessa James are both French Black figure skaters who will be performing in these Olympic Games. And you can look for Vanessa James to perform tonight in the Paris competition, which I believe starts at 9:45 on NBC. Obviously, I follow figure skating. Obviously, I follow Black history. And so I'm pretty excited to watch two Black women performing in the same Olympics, because I actually don't think that's ever happened before. It's kind of exceptional. So follow that. I did a really exhaustive 6-post story about Black women's history in figure skating, and it's really quite informative. And if you follow that, you might be interested to watch the episodes tonight. So go over there and look at that once you're done watching this episode. While I was researching the data on the Rippon protest of Mike Pence, I actually saw an ad for Queer Eye on Netflix. Now, I had never known, I watch Netflix all the time, no shade to Monique, but I saw this ad, and I'm highly suggestible to the point where after watching American Crime Story Versace last night, they kept running ads for these nacho fries from Taco Bell, and I was just like, I gotta go get those nacho fries. So I drive up to Taco Bell, get the nacho fries, they were okay, but I'm highly suggestible, and this is why I'm fundamentally opposed to advertisements in media, because people really shouldn't be marketed to and driven in a psychological way to go purchase something by watching content. Even if those advertisers are making the content possible, I really don't care. This is why my commercials run ad-free. This is why I don't really, why I avoid posting videos that contain ads, because I really think it's not good. Neither here nor there. As I was reading the data on the Rippon protest, it was on, I don't remember what website it was on, but it was on a gay website, like a gay news, or magazine. Might have been Gay Times. I don't know. But they had an ad for Queer Eye. And then I thought it was strange that they were advertising Queer Eye on a gay website, because Queer Eye for the Straight Guy in its original format was for straight guys, not gay guys. It was for straight men who really didn't understand how to dress themselves or feed themselves, or host or entertain or decorate their apartments, how to get advice from gay men on how to do those things. That's what I thought the show was about. I watched a couple episodes of Queer Eye, primarily because it's on Netflix and I was running out of stuff to watch. Also because it features Karamo Brown, who was an openly gay man who was on Real World one season. I don't remember which season. It was a long time ago. But ever since then, Karamo's really been really active and working really hard on television to sort of really present a good face to the black sort of queer diaspora, I guess. He's always out there, he's always front and center, and he works in all other segments. So I watched it mainly because Karamo was on it. I gave it a chance because Karamo was on it. Because the original Queer Eye was all white men. And so what I didn't realize in the original Queer Eye, I thought it was just about sort of the advice. And really it was more about bridging a gap between the gay community and the non-gay community. So in some way it was intersectional, but it was exclusionary because everybody was basically white. I watched a couple episodes of the show just to give it a chance. I watched the first episode. They had this old white guy on there as the guest, and I was just kind of like, okay, I don't get it. I don't want to get this. This is not going to be a show for me. Second episode, they featured an Indian guy, straight guy. And they revealed that one of the team members is actually Indian as well. So it was cool to see two people of color who are also gay acting in a quintet of this show, in the rebooting of this show. I thought that showed a lot of growth in terms of a concept. Lastly, the last episode I watched was probably the most impactful one, and I'm not going to give anything away, but if you watch the third episode of the first season of this show, they do an incredibly deep job of discussing sort of a racial tension in America. And it's such a good story, and it's something that really could only exist within the context of an interracial team. The original Queer Eye would have missed all of those opportunities simply because everybody in the quintet was white. But now you have this forum for an exchange and a dialogue amongst the races that's really incredibly powerful. So whether you're gay or not, whether you need advice on cooking, dressing, home decor, whatever, or not, I really recommend checking out a few episodes of this show, even if it's not just the third episode of the first season. And I keep promoting some of the stuff that Netflix is doing because, not to spite Monique and her protests of Netflix, but just to illustrate that sometimes as black people, when we protest something, we have to be mindful that we're shutting another door to other people's access to seeing themselves where they also have been underrepresented. You know, HBO produces a lot of pro-black content, but HBO also has an entire Latino channel. Like, they have an entire Spanish-speaking channel where you can go get content that if you live in this country, if you are not from here, if you're visiting from a Spanish-speaking country, you can feel more at home and welcome because of all of this wonderful content that HBO has. And so it really is something that we should be celebrating when companies take the risk on diversity at all. So the production, channels like Bravo should be rewarded, you know, and even more so when they focus on content that's not only pro-gay, but also intersectional in terms of race. because then it opens up to a broader series of conversations that really can draw an entire crowd and foment a discussion. And that's very, very important. Netflix does a very good job of not only doing pro-black content like Mudbound, but also they have a lot of queer friendly content and also just other languages and different things that really are important to support for our people who are different from us in this country. And that's something we got to be mindful of when we start doing these boycotts, because it's other people out there struggling too, and we don't want to cut anybody else's access off. So that's another reason why I won't be boycotting Netflix with me, myself, and Monique. Let me talk about now this motherfucker Quincy Jones, who just gave the most legendary, shade-ridden, tea-spilling interview. And in honor of him tonight, I am not drinking my traditional black coffee. I am drinking a little bit of green tea, honey, because he spilt it all. I'm not going to spill it here, but he spilt it already, and I don't have to do it again. Now, this is an interview conducted for the Vulture, and I know you've all heard about it already, but I'm going to just go back through it again because I took some notes. Some stuff that I found particularly poignant. As it relates to Black History Month, it really is this profound expression in black pop culture and black music history, and not only that, but just black education. And so it really is something you should read beyond the comedic value. So I just want to talk about a couple of things I learned in this. Let me, if I can find my albums section, I want to go to my albums. Favorites. Okay, took notes. I'm just kind of going through the bullet points of the things that I thought were particularly interesting out of this interview. It says, what'd you think when you first heard hard rock music? Quoting Quincy Jones. Rock ain't nothing but a white version of rhythm and blues, motherfucker. You know I met Paul McCartney when he was 21. Then it goes on. What were your first impressions of the Beatles? And Quincy goes on to describe how basically the Beatles didn't have any talent. And it sounds crazy, right? Because you've got the most talented ever, like not talented, but the most celebrated musical act in history. That this person, Quincy Jones, is now saying they really had no talent. And others, Quincy Jones is significant because Quincy Jones is not the first person to say this. Devotees will know who actually founded the Beatles. According to himself, the authoritarian on himself and all things that are global cultural and rock and roll history, the founder of rock and roll, also in conjunction with queer black history, Little Richard, is also the person who discovered the Beatles. He had them perform with him on tour, I think when he went to the UK. And his impression of the Beatles were that, okay, Paul is cool, George is cool, but really Ringo has no talent. Like, he said this, Ringo does not belong in this group at all. And so when they asked Little Richard if they would put them on and, you know, manage the group and take a percentage, he said no. Because in Little Richard's mind, now this is from the early, back in the day when they, around the same time Quincy's talking about now, when they first got started. And Little Richard said he would not put them on. Even looking back, he wouldn't have put them on for a percentage of all that money because basically those people, they didn't have the talent to really be as successful as they were. They were lucky. Quincy Jones says the same thing, underscores exactly what Little Richard said for different reasons. He goes into this whole moment where they had to completely re-record a whole session for Ringo. They sent him to lunch and recorded over him with somebody else, and then he came back and didn't realize he had been replaced on this track. That's the type of shade this man was throwing. He goes on to start talking about racism and Trumpism. I think this is the gag that got everybody, or one of them. He says, what stirred everything up? What stirred everything up? It's all about Trumpism. He's talking about racism in the industry. Jones goes, it's Trump and uneducated rednecks. Trump is just telling them what they want to hear. I used to hang out with him. He's a crazy motherfucker. Limited mentality. A megalomaniac, narcissistic. I can't stand him. I used to date Ivanka, you know. I was like, oh shit, he used to fuck Ivanka? That's crazy. And I didn't know about Ivanka was down for the swirl, but hey girl, get in where you fit in or wherever fits in you. I ain't mad. Now, the interviewer's like, wait, really? The interview can't really believe what's going on. It really is this colossal moment. It's crazy. Quincy goes, yes, sir. 12 years ago, Tommy Hilfiger who was working with my daughter, Kidada. Now, let me interject here, because I did not know Kidada Jones was Quincy Jones' daughter. Much like I didn't know Rashida Jones was Quincy Jones' daughter for the longest. We'll talk about her later. But Kidada Jones is the best friend of the late, great Aaliyah Dana Houghton. And they always worked together on Tommy Hilfiger ads. And I always thought Kidada was just some girl that Aaliyah knew from high school or whatever. I didn't know it was Quincy Jones' daughter. And I always wondered why Kidada was always in the Hilfiger shows and ads too. I was like, did Aaliyah just bring her on? Did she just put her on? No, Kidada probably put Aaliyah on. Had no idea. So that's just a small interjection there. But Ivanka wants to have dinner with you, Kidada says to Quincy. And he said, I said, no problem. She's a fine motherfucker. She had the most beautiful legs I ever saw in my life. Wrong father, though. Then the interviewer asks, would your friend Oprah be a good president? And here's where we get to the discussion about problematic, exceptional black men. You know, every now and then, it's cool to acknowledge that black men sort of have a blind spot or missed the mark somewhere, but his response here really pissed me off because it mirrored a lot of the sentiments that other people had about Oprah Winfrey running for president. He goes, I don't think she should run. She doesn't have the chops for it. If you haven't been governor of a state or CEO of a company or a military general, you don't know how to lead people. So this idea that Oprah Winfrey, who owned the Oprah Winfrey Show, the longest running and most popular and most Emmy Award winning, don't quote me on that show, ever in America, that bridged a cultural divide amongst race, sex, orientation, ethnicity, heritage, nationality. It bridged every gap, gender. It talked about every type of human condition, mental illness. Oprah actually passed legislation as the owner of that show. She actually challenged other legislation with beef in Texas. Oprah is really supremely qualified to serve as the President of the United States. Do I think she should run for the President of the United States? Do I think she would win a race? Maybe not. But to claim that she doesn't know how to lead people is fundamentally problematic for anyone to say, let alone a black man like Quincy Jones. So the interviewer presses back, which I was happy to see. He says, she is the CEO of a company. Well, she is the CEO of a company. And so Quincy responds, a symphony conductor knows more about how to lead than most business people. More than Trump does. He doesn't know shit. Someone who knows about real leadership wouldn't have as many people against him as he does. He's a fucking idiot. I also disagree with this, because now Quincy is kind of dodging his original claim that Oprah wasn't ever a CEO or that she knows how to lead people, and now broadly saying, oh, really, no business people should be president, which is not what he said before, and then further trying to switch it back to make it about Trump. But really, he says someone who knows about real leadership wouldn't have as many people against them as he does. And that's also not true, because approval ratings for people like Hillary Clinton crash when they're active and when they're challenging people and the American consciousness, but so did they for people like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was seen as a terrorist when he was alive until they killed his ass, and then Coretta Scott King spent the rest of her life building his legacy into something tangible for us to celebrate now. And then you had, now his approval ratings are through the roof. Now he has the national holiday. At one point, Quincy Jones talks about how Stevie Wonder and he worked together to help make MLK Day a national holiday. But again, it might come back to this sexist thing, because you can ignore the misogyny against Hillary Clinton. You can ignore that you're being misogynistic against Oprah, and yet still not understand how the same thing you're saying would apply to someone like Malcolm X or Martin Luther King, who you've obviously had a deference to and worked for. So I say all that not to shade Quincy, But just to say those are things that I noticed as kind of blind spots. And I think that's pretty frequent with black men, especially when they get to that level. It happens all the time. And I apologize, I know I'm running over 30 minutes here, but this is important stuff. They asked, let's see. He talked about John Coltrane. I was kind of heartbroken to find out that John Coltrane didn't synthesize Giant Steps by himself. I literally didn't know that, and that kind of broke my heart. But, you know, learning about him talking about John Coltrane's inspiration for Giant Steps is giving me keys to, he mentioned Slonimsky. It's giving me keys to go back and listen to other people that I didn't know about. So it really, again, it's so many levels to this history that you're learning from this one interview. It really is a celebration in Black history, and I'm really glad that it was released this month. He goes on to talk about just music industry as it is, and talent and skill and people just knowing how to play instruments and what that means, and talks about skills in playing an instrument. Like if you can't perform a certain skill, it's because you really don't know how to play this instrument. So if you're producing and you're not skilled, you're not able to really make music in the way that you should be able to. You're sort of limited. He talks about people having God-given talent, but not taking the time to get educated and trained and craft and work on their craft. So that was an interesting, as an artist, I picked up on that and kind of enjoyed that part of the interview. Then it just went left, right? Because he goes, they're talking about the cha-cha, and then all of a sudden, he's talking about Marlon Brando. I'm going to just quote this directly. Marlon Brando, he said, Brando used to go cha-cha dancing with us. He could dance his ass off. He was the most charming motherfucker you ever met. He'd fuck anything. Anything. He'd fuck a mailbox. James Baldwin, Richard Pryor, Marvin Gaye. So the interview he slept with them? How do you know that? So then Quincy Jones frowns and goes, come on, man. He did not give a fuck. You like Brazilian music? It really just kept bouncing around, and just the levels of shade, it was really nuts. And of course, I want to talk about one last thing that he said, and I'll bring it back to one final thing, and then I'll be done. He says, he was talking about sort of emotional preparedness and having breakdowns as a creative, and this is one thing. I'll just read the question because I don't remember the setup for it. It says, that's not what I was thinking of, but yeah, that's in there. I was thinking of a section where you describe having a nervous breakdown not long after Thriller. You talk so often about your ups, I'm wondering if maybe you can talk about one of your downs. So then Quincy replies, what happened was that I was a producer on The Color Purple. Spielberg and me are still great friends, man. He's a great fucking guy. I loved working with him. Then the interviewer goes, yep, but what happened on The Color Purple that caused your breakdown? So Quincy goes on to reply, what happened was that I was a producer on that movie, and everybody went on vacation after we finished filming. Everybody except me. I had to stay home and write an hour and 55 minutes of music. Music for the movie. I was so fucking tired from doing that. I couldn't see it. I put too much on my plate, and it took its toll. You learn from your mistakes, and I learned I couldn't do that again. So that's kind of, I liked that he did that and pointed that out as an interviewer. And it's the last thing I'm going to point out about this Quincy Jones interview is that at one point he does mention the vocal talent and exception that is Tevin Campbell. And of course the internet immediately comes for him in the whole, again, alleged accusations from the early 90s about how there was some, again, alleged molestation or sexual misconduct between Tevin Campbell and Quincy Jones. Now, we'll never really know the truth about this because I don't know what happened. There's no video, and really social media wasn't what it is now then, so there's no real way to prove what happened now. Tevin Campbell actually was trending on Twitter, so he came out the woodwork, and I ain't heard from him in a while, but he responded and was really like, y'all are crazy, and just 'cause, he really responded in some way to dismiss the whole thing. And he said, Angelic about to start getting all super homophobic, so stop it. He basically just pulled the plug on that whole thing. So kudos to Kevin. And of course, I went back to my Apple Music account and pulled up some Tevin Campbell's. Like, I'm up in here, I'm ready, darn ready to love you, to love forever. Okay, so that song, and then Can We Talk for a Minute? I mean, he has some hits now. Tevin Campbell has some hits. So Black History Month, Live in Black History Month, celebrate Tevin Campbell, pop that motherfucker on. Sorry, I'm in my Quincy mode. Pop him on your radio and play some tracks. Now, as always, I'd like to thank you all for watching. I have to thank donors to the show, as this is our Friends to the Show segment. If you'd like to become a friend of the show, please make a contribution of $1 or more to the PayPal link above at www.paypal.me/JKH2. And so let me pull up to my bumper, baby. Ba-da-dum, bum, bum, bum. Ba-da-dum, bum, bum, bum. Ba-da-dum, bum, bum, bum. Ba-da-dum, bum, bum. Riding in those city streets, waiting to get down. This is my hold music until I pull up the contributors list for this period of time. Thank you for holding. Won't you take your big machine somewhere in this town? Find it down the proper place. Follow all the written rules to come. And if you didn't know, that was also a little bit of Black history and living Black history, because that song Pull Up to My Bumper was performed by the legendary and incomparable Grace Jones, and I actually think it was produced by legendary record producer Nile Rodgers. Nile Rodgers produced a lot for Grace Jones. I'm not 100% sure if he produced that song, but I'm pretty sure he did. Throwing it out there. Check her out too when you check out Tevin Campbell. So I have to thank Elizabeth C., of course. She is my #1 contributor to the show, most frequent contributor, and first contributor to the show. So thank you so much, Elizabeth C. I want to thank Danielle H. I want to thank Laura V. I have to thank Sumi B. I have to thank Joseph R. I want to thank Elizabeth C. again for her contribution. I want to thank Barry G. And I also want to thank another anonymous donor who asked not to be recognized, but I have to recognize this person. So again, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Not On My Watch. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Retweet this and repeat this. And make sure to tune in next Thursday for the next episode of Season 3 of Not On My Watch. As always, I'd like to ask you to relax, relate, and resist. Thank you.
Too complex, much too complex, too complex, much too complex, too complex, too complex, too complex.